His lecture concludes the inaugural season of our Closer Look lecture series, which have given you a closer look at the permanent collection and some of the ongoing research into different areas of specialty by curators, by conservators, and now by our director. I'm delighted to say that the second season will kick off in February with a lecture by Associate Curator Isabella Lorez-Chavez on the early Netherlandish paintings collection, so please, please do come back for that. Before proceeding, though, I'll share our institutional land acknowledgement. The Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco occupy unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of what is now the San Francisco Peninsula. The Greater Bay Area is also the ancestral territory of other Ohlone peoples, as well as the Miwok, Yakuts, and Patwin. We acknowledge, recognize, and honor the indigenous ancestors, elders, and descendants whose nations and communities have lived in the Bay Area over many generations and continue to do so today. We respect the enduring relationships that exist between indigenous peoples and their homelands. We are committed to partnering with indigenous communities to raise awareness of their legacy and engage with the history of the region, the impacts of genocide, and the dynamics of settler colonialism that persist. Lincoln Park, where the Legion of Honor was founded in 1924, operated as city cemetery from 1868 until 1898. When the park was created, many of the burials were relocated, but the majority were not. Please join the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco in honoring the memory of the thousands of individuals still buried in this land. So, Tom really needs no introduction, of course, an internationally renowned tapestry scholar and former director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He joined the Fine Arts Museums as director and CEO 7 years ago, and his tenure has been marked by a series of initiatives designed to open the museums to various communities and constituencies, whether communities of local artists and visitors with the DeYoung Open, the Free Saturdays program, the DeYoungsters program, communities of origin with the newly opened Indigenous American Art Galleries at the DeYoung, communities of support through the recent Gifts of Art campaign, about which he will tell us more today. Please join me in welcoming Tom.
Emily, thank you. And thank you to you for joining us on what is a beautiful day. So I realize we have competition with the weather. It's a great pleasure to be here to culminate this year of lectures, the Close Look lectures, which of course has been part of the program we have had for the centennial of the Legion of Honor. And in respect to this program, I especially want to thank Devin Malone and Maria Agoville for the work they've done in leading public programs, in fact, hundreds of public programs. I'd like to thank Emily Beanie for championing this series and the curators who've taken part in it. And as Emily just mentioned, we will be starting a second program in February after the symposium for the Manet Morisot show. So do come back and join us for those lectures. And my talk this afternoon, by its nature, is going to be skimming very lightly over a wide range of different collections. But if you like or intrigued by what you're seeing, and if you missed the curatorial lectures over, do go, and they're all recorded, they're all on our YouTube channel, and very much worth a look. So what I'm going to be talking about today is the Gifts of Art campaign that we have really run over the last 3 years. The initiative came out of a recognition that shortly after I arrived, we realized we had a whole sequence of anniversaries coming up. 2020 was the 125th anniversary of the DeYoung. 2022 was the 50th anniversary of the conjunction of the Legion of Honor and the DeYoung as the Fine Art Museums of San Francisco. 2024 was the 100th anniversary of the Legion of Honor that we celebrated a year ago today, this weekend. And 2025 was the 20th anniversary of the new De Young building. And of course, if anniversaries call for anything, they call for gifts. So we thought, why not do a gift of art campaign? And we're drawing a bow around it this month. We're publishing a book that celebrates the gifts we've received. We thought we might get maybe 100 great works. The reality is that thanks to the generosity of 275 donors, we've received over 1,000 works of art, indeed 2,000. And indeed 2,000 if you include one gift alone of 1,000 very rare Mannerist 16th century prints. So it really is something tremendous to celebrate. I am tasked with trying to give you a quick overview of all of it, so there will be a test at the end. I will not be able to mention every gift, and I won't be able to mention every donor, but I want to give an idea, and I want to thank Lindsay Ganter, my senior advisor, for compiling this whole presentation. The gift that kicked it all off was the wonderful canaletto that had for many years been in the collection of Gordon and Anne Getty, an absolute signature work by this great painter made for an English patron that really epitomized the North European taste for Italian painting during the era of the Grand Tour. This great painting had been in San Francisco for many years, but it was among the treasures being sold from the Getty collection. And I well remember when the possibility, sometimes, very rarely, an opportunity comes to preempt a sale. If you make a generous enough offer before the auction starts, you can sometimes preempt a great work of art. And I recall at 2:30 a.m. in the morning in Paris, being on a three-way call with the Christie's representative, who was talking to a representative of the Getty family, and to Mrs. Wilsey, our long-standing chair emerita of the museums. And literally at 2:30 in the morning, European time, we struck a deal to preempt this great work and to keep it here in San Francisco for our local audiences. And this really was the challenge that I think has been the gauntlet that has stimulated the generosity of so many others. But as we've thought about this gift and the Gifts of Art campaign, I think something that has really come into focus for us is the degree to which the collections at the Legion and at the De Young are growing all the time. When you walk through our galleries, you see these beautifully installed and researched objects, and we sometimes forget the layers, the decades that have taken to bring these collections together. Here in this eye test, you just got a few of the iconic works in the collection, reflecting the span of decades in which the collections have come together. And here, just a little smorgasbord of some of the additional objects that have now come in through the Gifts of Art campaign, ranging from ancient Etruscan vases to contemporary works of art. What is always remarkable to me is that the American museum experiment is such a recent one compared to our European partners. Europe really had a head start during the age of the Enlightenment, when institutions like the British Museum came into being, fueled by the spirit of the Enlightenment, fueled by the spirit of education and discovery. Many of these collections were originally as much geological and biological as they were artistic. The British Museum had something like 20,000 stuffed animals in its collection when it was founded. And of course, this era was fueled by industrialization and by colonialism, and all the complexities that come with that. The other driving force in the foundation of the European collections was the gradual dismantlement of the great royal and ducal collections across Europe, with the wave of revolutions, the democratization of countries across Europe. Many of the collections came into civic hands and were a key part in the 19th century of the kind of the narrative that different countries began to construct about their identity and about their ambitions. So really this was the model of that I guess the founding fathers were looking to in the 1860s as America reached a point where it too was, after the Civil War, thanks to industrialization, at a point when it too could begin to think about this future vision. And John Jay is a great example, a sort of a lawyer in Paris for the 90th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, when he made a public speech in which he said, it's time for the American people to lay the foundation of a national institution and gallery of art. And really that decade, the 1860s, 1870s, were key to so much of what was to then become an absolute flowering. In Jay's case, he was one of the founders of the Metropolitan Museum, founded in 1870. Here is a wonderful painting from 1881 that depicts one of the early iterations of the Met when it was down on the lower Manhattan before it moved to the location we now know it for. This wonderful evocative image of an empty gallery. Those galleries are empty no longer. But it was during the 1870s, really, that across especially the eastern seaboard, we see the birth of a whole series of great American art museums in Boston, in Philadelphia, in New York, and elsewhere. And the rapid expansion of cultural collections, art collections, and cultural organizations was greatly eased during the late 19th and early 20th century by a number of factors. The power of the American dollar, the huge wealth being generated in America by the robber barons, J.P. Morgan and others, Henry Clay Frick. And of course, because of the political circumstances, geopolitical circumstances in Europe, there were easy pickings with the rising taxes in countries like Britain, with the First World War and the devastation that caused. There was an opportunity, there was a loosening of the hold of many of the great collections in France, in Britain, in Belgium and elsewhere, in Germany, that allowed huge numbers of works of art to come to the States. San Francisco gets in on the act in the mid-1890s, thanks, amongst others, to M.H. de Young, who was key in bringing the World Fair, the California Midwinter International Exposition, to San Francisco in 1894. And among the many pavilions around what is now the Music Concourse in Golden Gate Park, there was a neo-Egyptian temple constructed from plywood that housed the art component of the fair. And following the closure of the fair, this building was retained, and it became the Golden Gate Park Memorial Museum, and eventually the M.H. de Young Museum. The founding collections were a hodgepodge of objects, taxidermied animals again, objects from Europe and America, painting, sculpture, decorative arts, also objects from Alaska and Mesoamerica. And the spirit in which they were collected and displayed was, of course, a long way from the way we think about our collections today. There was a predominant, a very colonial attitude to non-American, non-European works of art, a legacy that we, quite frankly, are still contending with today, trying to right the balance, not least in the land recognition that Emily read at the beginning of this lecture. De Young realized that what he was doing was laying the foundations for the future. So it's rather wonderful to look back today and realize that we are playing our part in continuing to develop that vision. Across the city, his example spurred the activity of a family with whom he was in something of rivalry. Alma de Bretteville-Spreckels, wife of Adolf Spreckels, the sugar magnate, was a great Francophile. She was collecting sculptures by Rodin and decorative works, French, especially French and Belgian art. And in 1915, she was inspired by the French pavilion at the San Francisco Panama Pacific International Exposition. And the pavilion at that exhibition was a scale model, also mostly built from plywood, of the Hotel de Salm in Paris, which is right next to the Musée d'Orsay. You've had your back to it as you go into the Musée d'Orsay. Next time you're there, turn around. It's a beautiful building. And Alma got permission from the French government to make a replication, scale replication, with some adaptations of that building. That's what we're sitting in today. As the building went forward during the late teens and early 1920s, of course, we were in the shadow of the Great War, and so the idea came to create it as a memorial to the Californians who lost their lives. So we have this additional function in this building, which is also embodied by the painting above our heads of the apotheosis of the soldier being carried up into the heavens. So here we are, a second building. How to fill it? Well, right from the start, there were ambitions here as there were across in Golden Gate Park. And both museums had, from the start, a charter to collect art from the ancient world. Here we see on the left a Greek hydria purchased from the California Midwinter International Exposition for the de Young, and at right a Pelike that Alma received from the Queen of Greece. Some of you will have heard Renée Dreyfus giving her lecture about the relationship between Alma and the Queen of Greece. It always helps to have friends in high places. Over the decades, these collections have grown. We have the largest collection, or small but mighty collection, of ancient art in Northern California. And here we just see a few of the treasures, the wonderful winged genius from the palace of Ashurnasirpal, right out in the corridor here. The great, the torso of Hermes dating from the 2nd century AD, a gift of Richard Price. The wonderful anthropoid Egyptian coffin, a gift of Mrs. Wilsey in memory of her late husband. She always jokes that she sneaked his sneakers into the coffin. Center right, an Islamic bowl gifted by the Coles family, who've made generous gifts over the years of Islamic works of arts. And on the right, a little Seneb figure dating from about 1800 years BC, one of René Dreyfus's many acquisitions. Some of you will know that she's very assiduous in going after everybody. I think the list of donors on this piece has more than 50 names. Here are just some of the works that have come in through the Gifts of Art campaign. The Etruscan amphora on the left, which will be in our Etruscan exhibition next year, given in honor of George and Judy Marcus by the Ancient Art Council. A wonderful Sasanian bowl, richly decorated, gifted by Mrs. Willsey, Lucy Hamilton, and the Hursts. At bottom, a very rare Roman glass bowl, gifted by Bob Branston. And centre top, a Roman bust, gifted by Kirk Edward Long. And just to finish antiquities, here is a beautiful head dating from the Hadrianic period of Persephone, another gift that René went after many donors as part of the Gifts of Art campaign. This is the first female head to enter our collections in ancient sculpture. Just as the antiquities have been key to the collections right from the get-go, so too have European paintings. And today we have something like 800 paintings on display and in storage, ranging from medieval gold ground altarpieces all the way through to impressionist paintings of the Seine. We are especially rich in 17th century Dutch and 18th century French paintings. And again, the story is one of generosity by generations of donors. Absolutely key to getting the collections going were a couple, again friends of Alma de Bretteville-Spreckels, Mildred Anna and Henry Williams, who got their collection of about 100 European paintings out of Europe right in 1939, right on the brink of the Second World War, and eventually gifted them to the fine art museums, including this beautiful Pizarro. They also established a fund which over the years has allowed us to buy many great works, including this Cézanne, this beautiful Watteau, the famous Monet water lilies, which is not here now. It's currently at the Monet in Venice exhibition, now in Brooklyn, coming here next spring, and the Manet on the right, which is currently in the Manet-Morisot exhibition. Another couple who are absolutely key to the foundation of our painting collection were Margaret and Roscoe Oakes. He made his fortune in the oil business, and as oil magnates do, he started collecting European paintings, especially liking Flemish and Dutch paintings, such as this wonderful Van Dyck and this Rembrandt that he gifted. And the Oakes, too, had the vision to establish an acquisitions fund that continues to this day, and several of the pieces I'll be showing you today were acquired in part with funds from the Oakes gift set up more than half a century ago. Another key development factor for our European paintings collection was the gift of Samuel Kress, who had a series of department stores across the country. He built up an enormous collection of European paintings, some 3,000 paintings, and rather magnificently, at his death, divided the collection between the cities, the principal cities in which his stores had been located. And so from the Kress gift, we got Fra Angelico, El Greco, and Titian, amongst others. But of course, there are always gaps. And I've already mentioned the Canaletto, which got the whole Gifts of Art campaign going. We also acquired other works from the Getty sale, thanks to donors Roger Thomas and Arthur Libera, the beautiful Cézanne on the left, and thanks to an anonymous donor, the wonderful portrait by Pissarro on the right of his daughter, sitting on a sofa in front of a wall of his own paintings, which all of which can be identified, and which allows us to identify exactly when and where this painting was made. It's been a great pleasure, and for me, one of the great pleasures of being a director is seeing the way that the enthusiasms of our curators drive collection development. And it's been a great pleasure here at the Legion watching the energy that Emily has brought to the thinking about how we build and shape the collection. And especially, it's a moment when we're all super aware of not only the colonial origins of so many of our collections, but also of the implicit biases that have excluded various figures, not least women artists. And so one of the things that Emily has done since she joined us just over 4 years ago she's been on the lookout to expand the story we tell. This was this painting by Marie Guillemine Benoit, made in 1791, of the classical myth of Psyche. Was the first painting made by a woman artist to be exhibited at the French Academy. And Emily managed to track this down and to raise the funds to bring it here. And you'll see it in our 18th century galleries. Another, and with thanks to donations from a number of donors, including some who are here today, including Barbara Wolf, one of our trustees, who's here today. Another great addition to the collection is this absolutely fabulous painting by Lavinia Fontana, made in the very opening years of the 17th century, a portrait of a Roman lady. This woman bore 19 children and died in childbirth. And she is portrayed here with the 6 children that seem to have survived. Beyond the finery in which she's portrayed, a kind of statistics that say so much about the era. But this is now the earliest painting by a woman to have entered our collections. It came at a hefty price. Again, it's a reflection of the critical role curators play. This was in a private collection. Emily, through her contacts, had put out the word that we were looking for certain kinds of paintings, and a sharp-eyed dealer who knew the owner, who thought they might be able to move it from that collection, reached out and worked with Emily to do exactly that. And thanks to Margaret and Will Hurst, to Lisa and Doug Goldman, John and Cynthia Gunn, and Mrs. Dolby, and the Oaks Fund, we were able to raise the significant sum required to buy it. And then finally, again, women artists, the latest edition, you'll see these beautiful paintings by, they're up, aren't they? They are up. In our 19th century English gallery, these are painted by Angelica Kaufmann, one of the most celebrated artists of the late 18th century. And she typically portrayed scenes from history, often with a kind of highly theatrical style. And these are 2 recent additions to the collection, again, through generous support from our donors and trustees. Along with painting and ancient art, Decorative arts is also, and sculpture is also key to the identity of the Legion of Honor. And of course, right from the start, with Alma's love of Rodin, she knew him personally, she bought during his lifetime. Many of our bronzes were made and finished during his life, which is the big distinction between our collection and the collection down in Stanford. Veronica, I hope you don't mind me saying that. But Alma was also a great collector of Sèvres porcelain and other decorative arts, and once again, her friends had their arms twisted. This wonderful Fabergé tea table and tea service was a gift to Alma from the Grand Duchess Kirill of Russia in 2022. And this incredible neoclassical commode was a gift of Archer Huntingdon, distantly related to the Spreckles family, whose parents, mother Arabella Huntingdon, had created such an enormous and important collection. And here, another wonderful gift, the Hôtel de Trimoille interior, we know as the Salon Doré, gifted by Richard Ream in 1959, which was the subject of an extensive reinstallation under Martin Chapman, the former head of the Decorative Arts Division. Martin was a great champion of acquisitions. Just to show one fabulous piece that we brought in during the Gifts of Art campaign. This is a fabulous Italian Pietragiura specimen table, with obviously looking down on it, made in the very early 1800s, again embodying the taste of the Grand Tour, the sort of great display pieces that were being brought back to France and to Britain and being placed in the great hallways or in the dining rooms to really impress people. And this is just really one of the best of its kind. But we've also been adding all sorts of decorative, wonderful objects. On the left, beautiful rare silver candlesticks by Nicholas Spremont, gifted by Philip and Jamie Bowles, whose family has been so important in building our porcelain collections. At top center, a magnificent gilt ormulo clock, gifted by Woody Brock, one of a number of objects, decorative arts objects gifted by him. At the bottom center, a rare Meissen teapot, one of a larger number of Meissen ceramics, gifted by the late collector Malcolm Gutter. And at far left, Caspar Pfaff's figurative crucifixion clock, which is an automaton gifted by Mrs. Dolby. And just this is another of these objects acquired through the Gifts of Art campaign. It's an incredible panel by the late 18th, early 19th century carver, late 17th, early 18th century carver, Grinling Gibbons. And those of you who know anything about Gibbons know that he was able, he could carve wood almost like carving butter. He could turn a block of wood into a flower that looked like it was just opening. And most of his work survives in situ in country houses in Britain. But there are a few pieces that have been removed. And this very rare panel was in Los Angeles. Martin knew about it and was able to bring it in here, thanks to the generosity of our donors. And this is, I've mentioned the curators. The other heroes behind the scenes are our conservators, who do such great work in understanding and studying and conserving our different works. In this particular case, the backboard to which these delicate wooden carvings are affixed is probably not original, So we're assessing that at the moment and trying to figure out how we best present this sculpture in the galleries. Oh, and then one last wonderful thing. Things come up all the time. This amazing sculpture, gilt bronze sculpture of St. Sebastian by Pietro Tacca, who was active in the 1610s, 1620s, and 1630s, came up at Maastricht last year and has been bought as a promise gift for the museum by Roger Thomas and Arthur Libera. So we'll be putting that on the galleries, I think, maybe next week. Another core part of the Legion collections is the Achenbach works on paper collection. Alma de Bretteville-Spreckels collected works on paper relating to the theatre, and she had an important collection of ballet russe designs, one of which you see here. But the real foundation of the works on paper collection came with the gift from Moore and Hazel Achenbach in 1948 of more than 25,000 prints to the city. And that collection has been built over the decades. Various curators have led the charge. One absolutely key figure was Robert Flynn Johnson, who was head of the collection between 1975 and 2007, collected very widely, including into, here was the ballet russe design I just mentioned. But also we ventured into collecting Japanese prints. We have a very significant Japanese print collection. Some of you will have seen the exhibition we did about 18 months ago, drawn from that collection. And thanks to the generosity of donors like William Edelman, we continue to build that collection. We also have very significant collections of modern and contemporary prints, thanks to the generous support of the Crown Point Press and the Paulson Fontaine Press, both of which have shared with us one copy of every print, artist print they have made, including a lot of artist proofs. So you really see how some key artists like Diebenkorn, Ed Ruscha, and others develop the works, the whole genesis of their thinking. And then, as I just mentioned in my introduction, one of the major gifts in the Gifts of Art campaign was this very significant collection of around 1,000 very rare 16th and 17th century prints, mostly Mannerist, German, French, and Italian prints, which is a very sizable and important addition to our collections. But of course, the Gifts of Art campaign has also ranged more widely. Here we see beautiful pastel by Vigée Lebrun of a baby, wonderful Mary Cassatt pastel, mother and child, a Watteau at the bottom, and on right, one of the most recent gifts from an anonymous donor, a fabulous Toulouse-Lautrec that will be featured in an exhibition of Toulouse-Lautrec that we are organizing for about a year and a half from now. The Achenbach is also home to one of the largest collections of artists' books in the country, and that's thanks to the Logan family. But as always, there are gaps, there are always things we're looking for, and one gift that we were especially excited to get a year ago from Margaret and Will Hurst was a copy of the very rare book Jazz by Henri Matisse, created in 1947, just in the shadows of the Second World War. Many of you may have seen this exhibited at the De Young last year. Really, it's considered to be one of the greatest achievements of Matisse's printed works. We also have a sizable photography collection that has come in dribs and drabs over the years and has never really been shaped and thought of fully as a collection. So I was delighted to be able to appoint a new curator of photography, Sally Katz, quite recently. Sally is now working her way through this collection, beginning to think about how to shape it, and we're grateful for the support of local collectors like Jeffrey Frankel. Here we see one of 9 Diane Arbus photographs that Jeffrey has donated to us. Across the way, of course, we have major collections at the De Young, chief among which is the great Oceanic collection, much of which came from the collector Jolika, whose passion for New Guinean art really created what is a kind of pilgrimage collection of that art, featured obviously very prominently at the De Young. But as always, there are gaps, there are areas we want to expand. Some of you will know the name of Thomas Wiesel, who has been so generous to us with Native American artworks. But Tom also collects New Guinean art and has gifted us 13 key oceanic works as part of the Gifts of Art campaign, including this important Moa Kavaka figure from Easter Island on the left. And on the right, I show a wonderful Northern New Guinea shield gifted by Sir Derek Morn. The African collections are also part of our charter foundation at the De Young. The original collections were a few score pieces. We now have one of the most significant collections of African art in the country, and certainly on the West Coast, including this very rare Junet figure dating from somewhere around 12 to 1400. And this collection has grown very significantly in recent years, not least thanks to gifts made by the collector Richard Scheller, who has donated more than 150 works, including the Karanwamba figure at the left. But we've also received important gifts from Bob Wall, such as the Chieftain stool in the middle, and from longtime donor Blossom Strong, from whom we recently received a collection of African face masks. And, oh, sorry, I keep getting out of sync with my slides. That's what I was just talking about. I'm seeing the next slide. Shout at me if I'm behind. Move on. The life of the collections is the curators. And all too often, I think when people go to museums and they look at collections of African art, they are sometimes presented as if they are ancient art, something from the far distant past. And what the reality is that most of the African collections you see at the De Young, at the Met, in Chicago, in other museums, they are late 19th, if not 20th century collections. In many respects, they are modern art, but they have kind of been put behind this veil of perception. And so I think something that's very important to do is to connect the modern with the contemporary. And it's been a delight to see the work that our curator, Natasha Becker, has been doing at the De Young, curating contemporary African art in the context of our African collections. And I think really bringing new life to those collections, and also bringing new energy. We're actively collecting contemporary African art, thanks to donors like John Friedman. We see works here by Afi Chamatku Ngoku and Paula Nazareth, gifted by John Friedman. Another key collection, core collection at the De Young are the Native American collections. Many of you, I hope, have seen the new indigenous art display, the new galleries. Our curators call this Pot Island, and it has these amazing ceramics and woven baskets dating from the 19th and early 20th century. And we have been very active in recent years along the same lines that I mentioned with Natasha, with African art. So Hilary Olcott, our curator of Native American art, has been buying works by contemporary Native American artists, in some cases commissioning them, living artists who are working in living traditions, like Navajo weaver Melissa Cody, whose vibrant work we see on the left, or Kanpua Hanska Luga, whose work we see on the right, which takes the form of a teepee stretched out and turned into a painting. And of course, we also have very important Mesoamerican collections. This really goes back to the bequest of Harold Wagner in 1976, who gave us very important mural fragments for Teotihuacan. And these objects were, in fact, subsequently the sort of objects that had been taken out and were then the subject of discussion. But we we returned some of these to the Mexican government, and then with the agreement of the Mexican government, much as we have done with the Papua New Guinea collection that I showed, the Jalika collection I showed earlier, we hold the objects that we now display through a kind of agreement with the Mexican government. And I think that signals how the fine art museums have been very forward-looking. This all happened long before I got here, but been very forward-looking as they have grappled with some of these colonial legacies that we're working our way through. But on the subject of Mesoamerican art, one of the great gifts to the Gifts of Art campaign was this a major collection of ancestral Mayan ceramics that from Alec and Gail Merriam that are now on display at the De Young. Another key part of the collections are textiles. After the Achenbach, numerically, something like 15,000, numerically, the next largest collection is textiles, with some 15,000 objects that range from ancient fragments through medieval tapestries, all the way through to contemporary costume and dress, fashion. Here we see one of the wonderful Gobelin tapestries of Joan of Arc, now on display down in Gallery 1, which was part of the gift to Alma from the French government. And here are two wonderful Dior dresses gifted by Grover Magnin, the president of I. Magnin department store, who was key to the foundation of our fashion collections that have been supplemented under the curation of our curators, Jill D'Alessandro and Laura Camerlengo, and the generosity of local collectors. Here we see dresses from left, Gianfranco Ferre, gown gifted by Urier Pasquarella. At center left, a showstopper by Edwin Udshorn, gifted by Tannum Davis Bowen. Center right, a Christian Lacroix for Patou dress from Susie Kellams Dominic. And at right, a Rodarte dress gifted by Christine Suppers, who's really been the kind of fairy godmother of our fashion collecting, making very significant gifts over the years. And the collecting goes on. Here we see a wonderful tapestry, one of three, that was Brussels, 18th century, owned by William Randolph Hearst, gifted to the Brooklyn Museum back in the 1940s, and recently deaccessioned by the Brooklyn Museum. And thanks to Will Hearst, grandson of William Randolph, we were able to buy this set for the fine art museums. But we're also collecting contemporary, such as the Kalisha Woods Girl Dinner on the left, or the wonderful Beza Butler quilt some of you will have seen on display at the de Young recently. Again, all acquired through the Gifts of Art campaign. American art is, of course, core to the identity of the de Young. We have some 5,000 works curated by the American Art Collection. A pivotal moment for this collection was the acquisition in 1970 of Frederick Edwin Church's wonderful Rainy Season in the Tropics, which is really the kind of a key piece in our 19th century American collections. And it was this acquisition, one thing leads to another. I hope you're all taking notes, because you will all be I want you to be the other. This acquisition was what stimulated John D. Rockefeller to gift his collection to the de Young in 1977. And that collection was absolutely seismic, because it included 110 paintings, 29 drawings, and 2 sculptures, and really encompassed the great 19th century artists, and early 19th and 20th century artists who defined the American canon. And of course, the de Young has very actively built in its modern and its contemporary collections. Here we see the wonderful Ruth Asawa sculptures gifted by Ruth herself. She was a trustee of the Fine Art Museums back in the early 2000s. Here we see images of works by African American artists acquired in 2018, 62 works acquired, including Thornton Dial, Lonnie Holly, Ronald Lockett, and Annie Mae Young, acquired from the Souls Grown Deep Foundation. And just recently, with the Gifts of Art campaign, Bernard and Barbara Osha have gifted 61 amazing American paintings to the collection, including works by Winslow Homer, John Singer Sargent, William Merritt Chase, and Georgia O'Keeffe. So it's quite remarkable seeing that these collections are still so dynamically evolving thanks to the generosity of San Francisco patrons. And at the modern end, here we see works by Joan Mitchell, Manuel Neri, and David Smith, gifted by the Wayne Thiebaud Foundation, Lorna Meyer Callas, and Maury Gregg. Just manifesting the range of acquisitions that we've made in this last 3 years. And just to round out the American collection gifts, one of the most exciting gifts of this whole campaign is this wonderful painting by Frida Kahlo, made in San Francisco, a painting of a woman called Jean Wright, who was the wife of one of Diego Rivera's painting assistants. And this painting is owned by John Bergruen and is a promised gift to the collection. Finally, and very briefly, I've been talking about contemporary art throughout this talk. Many of the works that we've been looking at were contemporary when they were made. Well, they were all contemporary when they were made. They were relatively contemporary when they were acquired by the museums. And I believe that it's very important for us to continue to grow the collection And thanks to our curator, Claudia Schmuckli, who became curator of contemporary art in 2016, we've had a very dynamic acquisition program in this area. Some of you will recall the installation of Wangechi Mutu's sculptures here at the Legion in 2021. And here, this sculpture, Outstretched, was one of the acquisitions we made at that time. More recently, as part of the Gifts of Art campaign, Mikkel Svein gifted us $1 million to go and buy works by emerging San Francisco artists. And here I'm showing a range of those works that Claudia, she went out into the studios and into the galleries and acquired works by 40 young artists who are now all part of the collection. Another ongoing aspect of the collecting is funded by the Phyllis Wattis Fund. And I think it's important to mention this. When Phyllis Wattis died at the age of 92, she gave us a significant endowment to buy works of African art, modern art, and American art. And over the years, we've acquired something like 800 works through this fund. And here I just show some recent acquisitions. At the top, a work by Rick Bartow, a Native American artist. We've already talked about the Melissa Cody tapestry. We've also got here a snapshot of the Isaac Julian film we acquired 2 years ago, and a work by Matthias Kauja, a Papua New Guinea artist, who you can't perhaps see it here, but this depicts his visit to Great Britain to meet Queen Elizabeth II, and it's currently on display in our Oceanic galleries, and it's all sorts of wonderful details. It records what he wore to meet the Queen. You have to see it up close. Finally, I show Yinka Shonibari's monument, which was the showstopper at the Nigerian Pavilion at the Venice Biennale a year and a half ago. It is a meditation on the bronzes that were looted from Benin by the British Army in the late 1890s during a horrific campaign that decimated much of the population in the area, the famous Benin bronzes. And Yinka Shonibari made this work out of terracotta to comment on and memorialize these objects. And we have acquired this work, which has this bright green figure of the British commander who led that terrible expeditionary force. And this is currently on display in Nigeria at the new National Museum that just opened there 2 weeks ago. So we have lent it to them for that opening, and it will come to us after that. And we're going to do a Yinka Shonibari exhibition at the Legion in a year's time. So that's something to look forward to here. Phew. I have taken you through a very rapid outline of gifts from 275 patrons that, as I said, total 1,000 gifts, 2,000 works of art in total. And I've tried to give an idea how these collections are both, they splice together with and they continue this great tradition of philanthropy and generosity that has made the fine art museums what they are, and indeed American museums across the country, thanks to the tax laws. We all hope that the current administration will not destroy the basis of those tax laws on which all of these institutions and universities and churches and synagogues and Muslims all depend. So it's an interesting moment, but I feel very excited, despite the national politics. I feel very excited about the local politics, because I feel that the new administration is very art-friendly. They're very aware of the role that art and culture play in San Francisco, and are being very supportive of us in various ways. So I feel very excited about our future, and as you walk out into the Legion today, I hope you'll look around you with a refreshed sense of the remarkable story that we are all part of, and to the extent that you can, I hope you will support us and twist the arms of those of your friends who have works of art that maybe should come to us. Thank you very much. It's a little over an hour anyway, so.